Welcome everybody to StudyTank. I'm Nonzo, a software developer and one of the community organizers here at TechTank. Part of TechTank is our StudyTank initiative, which is a virtual space that allows us to get together to discuss concepts around um, web technologies, data structures and algorithms, and anything that is really related to the web. We started the Community Educators Program to invite members from our community to teach about topics that they're passionate about, because we believe that the learning journey is not just about learning new topics, but it's also about communicating the topics that we've learned. Tonight, we have an awesome session by Andrew, who's going to be talking to us all about feature flags and the powerful things that feature flags enable in our software development process. So at the end of the presentation, you'll get a chance to ask questions to Andrew, either through chat or by muting your mic, and then we can have a discussion around that. So without further ado, let's welcome Andrew. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Nonso, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm super excited as well. How's it going?
It's going fantastic. I was saying earlier, I very much appreciate not being in the weather that many of you are in right now in Toronto. I miss winter sometimes, but it's moments like this that I definitely do not miss the kind of winter that y'all often experience.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal today. It's pretty brutal today. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm excited to see feature flags and what you have in store for us.
Amazing. All right. Well, I love that I'm set up. I have the many screens. So now I just need to make sure that I have the right screen shared for the right things. Otherwise, everyone will just get to see my company Slack messages. All right, here we go. Which is really why we all come to these sessions. All right, let me move out. I'm going to stop share for a second because I think I'm still in my optimize mode. Yes, I am, because I want to see all of your faces as I'm going through this. So let's jump into a screen share here. There we go. Now we can see all your faces. Nonzo, which screen are you seeing right now?
I am seeing your presentation screen.
Awesome. There we go. So let's make sure that this is working. Did you just see some text come up on the screen there?
Yeah. What if I
Fantastic.
told?
Awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's jump into it. Also, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here to talk to you all today about a topic that's very close to my heart. I always like to start my talks with a little sort of TLDR. Sometimes I literally do it with a TLDR, but I thought in these virtual meetups, it's really fun to do it in kind of a creative way. I'm really gonna try and sell you on this presentation. I think I've got 2 slides to do it. So what if I told you that there was a single dev practice that could help you seamlessly control application behavior, personalize user interactions, rapidly address bugs and performance glitches, implement effective A/B testing, adapt content to regional regulations, and introduce updates in controlled phases? Now, what might you call such an amazing tool? You might call it wizardry in code. You might call it a bug buster's best friend. You might call it the developer's magic wand. You might call it code control sorcery, the panic button avoider, the no more oops protocol. That one's definitely my favorite. Or you might call it feature flags. Hey, everybody. My name is Andrew. Not already give me a bit of an introduction, but I'm a developer advocate at DevCycle. More on that later. And I'm super excited to be here today to talk to you, give you a little bit of a primer on feature flagging. Our talk today, here's kind of a rough flow of what I'm going to be talking about. We're going to talk a little bit about my background. Going to talk obviously about what feature flags actually are at kind of a top level. We're going to look at why they matter, so why these are a really important tool in a developer's tool bag, toolkit. We're going to talk about how they're managed, particularly managed at scale. We're going to talk about who uses feature flags. We're going to look at how to implement feature flags. So I've actually got a little bit of a demo on what this looks like as a developer implementing feature flags. And then I'm going to try and provide you with a few more resources that you can explore as you are kind of going through this process of learning more about feature flags and the process. As we're going through, you've got the chat box. Feel free to throw the questions in there kind of as they come. I'm not going to see them, but I'll see them at the end, and then you'll have sort of a way that we can kind of record the questions as we go. All right, so let's jump into it. A little bit about me. I was saying to the team earlier, so I started out my journey into developer relations and feature flags and technology in kind of a much different way. I actually started out as a youth worker after I graduated from university. Spent a few years doing that, and then was lucky enough to move on to a university out here in the greater Victoria area where I live out in BC, where I took on an engineering outreach manager recruitment role to try and bring in future engineers into the university. And while I was doing that, I got really inspired by the process of working with young people. And I went back to school, and I decided that I've been working with young people. I love technology and engineering. I really wanted to be a classroom teacher and to kind of get people inspired about technology. But my timing was awful. And so in 2020, I finished my degree. And then a couple of other things that some people may be aware of happened. I don't know. But I actually was really lucky because I ended up landing in a really great job working with a company out here in Victoria called Battlesnake as their community manager. And in 2023, Battlesnake was acquired by DevCycle, the company that I currently work at, which I'll talk about later, but we're a feature flag management platform where I currently work as a developer advocate on the growth team. So that's kind of my journey into tech. And so why am I telling you this? Because my goal is to deliver things in kind of a fun and edutaining way. I want you to walk away from this having been slightly entertained, but definitely learning something new. I didn't bring my glasses for glasses change, but sometimes just to level up, I'll change the color of my glasses mid-show. But today it's just the red and the yellow. All right, so that's a little bit about me, but that's not why you're here. You signed up for this webinar, this meetup, because you wanted to learn more about feature flags. So what exactly are feature flags? All right, so we're going to go very top level here when we look at what are feature flags. And we're going to kind of look at what are feature flags from the concept of like, what is feature flagging? And then we'll look at the flags themselves kind of as we go on here. So at kind of a top level, feature flagging is a software development technique that allows for you to modify like a system behavior without having to change any of the source code. So what that means is rather than having to push new code into production to make a change to what your application or system or tool does, you're able to do it without actually having to go in and make a deployment. You're able to make that change in a slightly different way that we'll look at kind of as we go through. So there's a bunch of purposes of feature flags. You kind of got a preview of it in my little infomercial at the very beginning. But feature flags kind of have three kind of main purposes, three ways you can kind of think of them being used at a top level. The first one is to activate or deactivate some specific function within your application or your system. Controlling visibility of certain features. Maybe you want some people to be able to see things or not be able to see things. And then the third thing is to change the behavior of some specific feature set based on conditions. So this is like very top level of what feature flagging is all about as a concept. And while that's really useful, we're all developers here. So I wanted to be able to show you what a feature flag actually looks like. And so here I will fully disclose, I'm not a JavaScript developer. I don't know why I chose to write this in JavaScript. That's on me. So please Please don't judge the terrible program that I've written here. But this is at a core level, this is a feature flag in action. So we have kind of two parts to this. The first part is on line 2 with this new variable feature, this new feature variable that we've created, which is kind of pulling in a value from an M file and setting that new feature as either true or false. And then we have line 5 through 9, which is some conditional logic that is showing new feature if that new feature variable is true, and otherwise is going to show the old feature. Now you may be saying to yourself, Andrew, but this isn't showing me anything except a console log. And yes, you are correct. But again, a PHP developer, please forgive me for all of my JavaScript sins. So at its core level, what a feature flag is a conditional statement to toggle functionality on or off based on some sort of a configuration. So when we look at this here, the two statements I've bolded, the conditional statement and the configuration, that configuration is what we're seeing on line 2, and then that conditional statement is what we're seeing on line 5 through 9. And so this, at its core level, the base level, this is a feature flag. You are showing a certain thing that you want to see when whatever your configuration is a certain way. And there's a lot of different idiosyncrasies within this process and different ways that you can expand it. But at a top level, this is sort of the simplest form of a feature flag. This is feature flagging at its core. And chances are you have been making feature flags or adding feature flags to your code without even knowing it. All right, so that's sort of what feature flagging is. That's what a feature flag looks like. But when we look at sort of all of those use cases that I presented, they all often require a different kind of feature flag and a different type of feature flag. And well, these are all fundamentally the same thing, still that same conditional statement and some sort of a configuration. There's some different types that have different ways that you can set them up to make the feature flag as impactful as possible. So first one, which is really the most basic kind of feature flag, is what you'll often be using, is known as a release flag. So this is used to separate the release process from code deployment. So we often think of a release being related to a deployment that we do. So at a certain point, you're going to say, enough is enough. All of the features we're going to add are done. We're going to deploy it, and that will be version whatever you're looking at. But with feature flags, we're able to change that process because, and as you'll see a little bit later on, you can actually have all of your features that you're going to release in your code at any given point in time. And then you can decouple the process of releasing code from releasing features. And so an idea here is what we just saw, this idea of a brand new feature being released, and you want to slowly release it out if you've decided that that feature should be seen. Based on whatever configuration and whatever criteria you've decided, people should be able to see that. The second kind feature flag is an experiment flag. This is the kind of feature flag that will be used to send users down specific pathways for testing. So this is where we're looking at things like we talked about earlier with A/B testing. This is where experiment feature flags are really useful. And multivariate tests, any kind of experiment that you might want to do to test out how something works. That's also another use case for a feature flag and another kind of main type of feature flag. Third kind is a permission flag. So this is the kind of flag that would be used to gate features based on properties. So maybe you only want paid users to be able to see specific content. You can have your conditional configuration statement basically only show that feature is true if somebody has an account that says that they're a paid user, or you could do things like rolling out a new feature to a specific market based on geography. So perhaps you only want to roll out a new feature to North America or to Europe or to Africa or to Australia. Feature flags provide you a way, and a permission feature flag is kind of a way to gate those properties. And finally, you have things like operation flags. And so these are flags you might use to protect really important pieces of your system. So this is feature flags you might use for migrations from one infrastructure to another. We'll talk about that later. At a core level, though, this is sort of like, these are really important feature flags that you might need over the long term that are going to stay in your code for a while. And again, there's different ways to set up all these. There'll be an opportunity to kind of look at these in a little bit more detail as we go through, but these are not only types of feature flags, but they also kind of show you the breadth of things that feature flags can actually do for you as a developer or as a team that's looking to implement these. And now these kind of concepts here, this kind of idea of having different types of feature flags is actually taken from an awesome article that's published on Martin Fowler's blog called Feature Toggles, aka Feature Flags. If you go to Google and look up feature toggles, aka feature flags, and then there's like a Martin Fowler, you'll see it. You'll see all of this stuff shown, and it goes into a lot more detail, provides you with some more specific examples. And so highly, highly encourage you to check that out. All right, so what are feature flags? Some sort of a configuration, conditional logic to show a specific feature, roll out a specific feature. There's the decoupling. We've got release flags. We've got operations flags. We've got experiment flags. And we've got permission flags. And they're really important to our development cycle. But why do they matter? So like at a core level, a lot of us have probably been developing with feature flags for a really long time, and we haven't been feeling necessarily like we were necessarily missing something. So why do feature flags actually matter? All right, so to kind of explain this, I want to take it from the perspective of what it's like coding without feature flags. And you may not have actually realized this, but when you start to code with feature flags, you understand that so much of this is true. So coding without feature flags is a little bit like walking across a high wire without a safety net. I really love these analogies and just these concepts here. But the idea here is that when you're releasing your new features that you're developing into production, often you're going to be developing a new feature in a feature branch. It's going to be long-lived, and then you have to merge it back into main, and then maybe there are things that go wrong, and maybe you think you figured all of it out in your staging environment and your QA environment, and then it gets into prod, and now something goes very wrong. Feature flags actually provide you a fix for this. They give you a safety net when you're crossing that high wire of releasing features into production. Now, I've got another analogy here, and you may not like this one, but maybe you will. Coding without feature flags is like being stuck in the checkout line at the grocery store as a developer. And now to understand this, you've got to understand, sort of jumping back to that previous example, what it's like to code in a professional development team if you're doing branching development, where you have a new feature, you create a feature branch, you work on the feature in that branch, and then eventually you merge it back in. And because of the nature of features, often one feature or part of a feature in that branch or another branch needs to be finished before you can merge in, and therefore you end up having to wait for things to be done, and it's a long process that can be really frustrating. Feature flags remove that friction, because at any given point in time, you can have all of your features in your sort of main branch. And this is really great for things like trunk-based development. And then you're not having to wait for anybody. You can constantly be deploying or pushing your work into the main branch and see it in production. And you can use feature flags to turn that feature on or off, or to decide who you want to show it to. All right, so that's what feature flag coding without feature flags is like, and kind of some great analogies that show you the power of what they're there for. But feature flags also really specifically enhance parts of the development process. So one of those pieces is continuous integration, continuous deployment, these ideas of continuous X, CI/CD, you've probably heard of before. If you haven't heard of it, it's this idea of sort of processes and tools and systems that enhance teams to deliver code changes more frequently and reliably through automation. So it's automated testing and building and deployment. It's a lot of tools that do that. And feature flags really enhance this process in a couple of really meaningful ways. So the first thing they do is, like I was talking about before, they really do a great job at decoupling that deployment process from the release process. So new code, new features that you're developing, are able to be deployed into production without being immediately live to users. Because you can set that default state of a new feature to be false and nobody can see it, then you have the ability to roll out to a specific audience based on your own targeting rules and whatever you're deciding to use. So that's a great thing that this does. So now we're looking at testing in production. So what does that mean? This means being able to test in a real world environment without having to break your production application. And this is really important because I think so often as developers, we build in our development environment, which works perfect. And I mean, I think we've all said to ourselves, it works in development. And then you roll out to a staging environment if you're using a staging environment, and you've done all the work to get this staging environment exactly like your prod environment. And then you push to prod on a Friday. Why, I don't know. But you do it, and then everything breaks, and then you're on pager duty, and you get that pager duty like message to you, and you're having to like pull out the laptop in your bag, and you're out to dinner with your partner, and you're like, oh, I've got to deal with this. That's really hard. The great thing is with feature flags, you're actually able to test in a real world environment without necessarily releasing this feature to all users. And what's better is that when you do end up having big issues that happen, you can actually really rapidly mitigate and recover from them. Because feature flags actually kind of serve as an emergency off switch in your code for new features. So if you've done your job and you've wrapped all of the pieces of this new feature in the right feature flags, or as DevCycle calls them, we call them variables, you're able to really meaningfully or really quickly, I should say, turn off those features and stop them from impacting anybody else. Because as we all know, if your website goes down, if your application goes down, that means that you're losing potential users. It means that you're potentially losing money. It means you're potentially losing a lot of things. And so the faster that you can recover, the better, and the faster you can get back to having that dinner with your partner and being able to put that pager duty notification in your pocket. All right, I'm going to take a quick drink. As we kind of look at some use cases that feature flags are really, really good for. And you may notice that I'm repeating a lot of these things, and I think it's because feature flags so often are not necessarily thought of as being as powerful as they are. And so I really just want to kind of show just how useful of a tool these are for developers. And I think kind of repeating some of these things is a really important way to do that. So one great feature flag use case, beta testing, we talked about this. So with feature flags, you can really easily implement some sort of a user opt-in system and then allow for user experience feedback. I actually did a tutorial recently in a React app where you can code a toggle that users can opt in or out to a new feature in a really easy way. That's a great thing to implement, that you can use a feature flag management system, or you can kind of do it on your own. Other things like canary releases and dark launches. If you've never heard of canary releases and dark launches, highly encourage you to Google these after the talk, but allows you to sort of safely deploy to a small subset of users without kind of more widely releasing, and allows you to do it in a really impactful way. Another thing, progressive delivery is a really important thing, especially if you're wanting to slowly roll out a new feature. You don't want to necessarily have your servers get upset with you / be paying lots and lots and lots of money if things go wrong. So you can time rollouts there. Another thing, and we kind of talked about this before, it kind of falls into the beta testing, but product experimentation. So being able to implement these kind of data-informed experiences. Feature flags are a core piece of that. Even if a feature flag is not necessarily for product experimentation, it's a useful tool or useful part of that process. Kill switches, like I said before, disabling features without using engineering resources, also without having to like push into production. I think one of the really crazy things about about modern development that's both a blessing and a curse is we have really awesome build pipelines that check for errors and do a lot of the hard work, these DevOps processes. That's amazing until you need to immediately fix a feature and roll back to something that you've done. Then all of that time spent with that build process happening means that time that more users are being impacted by things that go wrong. So this provides you a way to have an immediate kill switch. And I'll show you a little bit later in the demo just how fast this kill switch works to kind of turn off a feature in production. And then the final thing, I talked about this earlier, infrastructure migration. So things like moving from on-prem to a cloud service provider like AWS or Google or Azure. Any of these, the process, if you decide to like self-host to go to one of these, you don't want any downtime. You want zero downtime. And so feature flags are a way, especially when you combine it with things like progressive delivery and all the rest of this stuff, you are able to kind of move and use it for situations like infrastructure migration in a really, really meaningful way. All right, so we should hopefully now have a bit of an idea about what feature flags are, what feature flagging is, I should say, kind of different types of feature flags that exist out there, why they're really important, what a bunch of the different use cases are for them, what development looks with and without them, how are feature flags managed. Now, I did take a look at the chat. And I saw somebody ask a question about what's an M file, and I should have pronounced that more. It was an ENV, an environment file. And so you may be asking yourself, that's how you manage feature flags, right, Andrew? You already said that we use an M file or a config file within our application to manage feature flags that we can control at some area outside of our code base. And that's true. That's a really great way to manage feature flags. And I highly encourage you, if you're starting to explore feature flagging, do that. It's a really easy way to start the process of using feature flags. You probably are already using an ENV file for something. Go ahead and start using it for feature flags as well. However, at a certain point, you may get to the number of feature flags that are more than what you can manage in that config file. If you end up having 100 feature flags, it's hard to manage them. So feature management is a new, I guess, tool set that exists in the world of modern web development that is used for managing feature flags scale. And when I talk scale here, I'm talking hundreds, thousands, millions of feature flags. And you can actually see here on the right-hand side, this is an actual, I think this code is correct. Yeah, this is like a React example of what a feature flag looks like here. And you can see here that we actually do have, like, we're importing this use variable value, and then we're using this use variable value hook to talk to the dev cycle feature management platform, which is the equivalent of our kind of like remote config file. So feature management is a tool set for managing feature flags at scale. It's also really useful because there's a lot of things built into it that provide you a framework for feature flag driven development practices. Now, this is a term that's not used a lot, but when I look at feature flag driven development practices, which is a mouthful to say, I look at things like trunk-based development. And that's where you no longer use branches to build new features, you use feature flags. We're also looking at things like test-driven development. While you don't necessarily need feature flags to do that, it's a really useful tool for doing experimentation and the kind of testing that you're looking at. And then feature management is really essential for streamlined flag implementations across a wide variety of situations. So if you're an indie dev working by yourself, chances are you can probably go ahead and use like a single file that you know where everything is. But when you're a team of 100 developers and you're trying to figure out who did what to which feature at which time, or you've got multiple platforms where your system is running. So maybe you've got mobile and web and desktop and Mac and Windows and all these different systems. You need a way to be able to manage feature rollout across all of these in a really streamlined way. And that's what feature management is kind of all about. So feature management is something you've probably never heard of before today, but believe it or not, the feature flag management ecosystem is like kind of hot right now. I never thought that I would say feature flags are the new hotness, but feature flags are the new hotness, people. If you didn't realize that, I need fire emojis in here. That's what I didn't add. I forgot. I'll go back for the next version of this. And one of the things that's really been driving that is this new standard for feature flagging called open feature. And so open feature is by the same folks that have created and maintained the open telemetry standard, Dynatrace. They're a telemetry company. They've kind of spearheaded the open feature initiative. And through that, they actually created this sort of agnostic sort of like intro to feature flagging tool, framework, practice called FlagD. And FlagD is kind of like your gateway into feature flagging, because you can use it with just sort of a basic config file, or you can then, ideally, you can then transition to a larger feature flag management provider or service later on, if you get to the scale that you need one. So you may be saying to yourself, Andrew, what do you mean a feature flag provider? What are these feature flag providers? I've only ever heard of DevCycle, and they are fantastic. Why would I ever go anywhere else? Well, there's a lot of choice out there for you. And chances are, if you've never heard of DevCycle, you've probably heard of another really popular feature flag, and kind of the company that kicked off the feature flagging industry, LaunchDarkly. And if you didn't know what LaunchDarkly did, now you do. And if you haven't heard of LaunchDarkly, you might have heard of another one of these platforms, PostHog, Flagsmith, CloudBees, or maybe one of these other ones, ConfigCat or Split or Flipped, or maybe one of these other ones, Growthbook or Unleash. All of these are feature flag management platforms, and this is just a small taste. But of course, one of the other feature flag management platforms that I was talking about is DevCycle. And this is not a sales pitch, but just like a little bit about DevCycle, because I'm going to do a demo in DevCycle to kind of show you what feature flagging looks like at this scale in just a minute. And so feature flagging with DevCycle, like we've really focused as a company, as a platform, with deep focused on DevX. If you've never heard of DevX, Google it, DEV, and then the letter X. It stands for developer experience. The goal here is that people have realized that it sometimes is really challenging to be a developer working with dev tools. And so dev tools focus on making those platforms as powerful and as easy to use for developers as possible. That's a really beneficial thing for the entire ecosystem. And so DevCycle has realized this, and we've really tried to build our platform around this idea of making developer experience better. So things like we have a unified dashboard. So there's like, you can view different environments that you might have your feature flags on in a really easy way. Feature flag grouping. We have something called feature variables, which are within sort of a feature, and so allow you to cluster flags in a really useful way. It's things like, and we're not the only ones doing this, but things like integrations with GitHub, VS Code, Jira. We have a really great CLI, as do some other folks that are in this space. And then things like obviously a huge amount of support for diverse tech stacks. So basically every feature flag management platform that exists out there has got a feature flag in kind of every major system. But then there's also some feature flags that are specific to environments. And so I'll show you where to get more information about that later. Okay, so we looked at why feature flags matter. We looked at kind of what feature management is all about. We know why feature flags exist now, and we know how they look. Who's actually using these? Because you may be saying to yourself, Andrew, you did a really good like TV infomercial pitch at the start of this where you said words like magic and extraordinary, and you waved your hands around a lot. But nobody's actually using these things, right? Well, I wanted to share just a few teams that are using feature flags in production that we're obviously very aware of. Some of them you might have heard of, some of them you might not have. Zonar, maybe one you haven't heard of. IAG, maybe one that's more in your world. You might have heard of them before. Getting into some that you're probably more aware of. Nord Security, so anybody out there that uses NordVPN, it's the same company that's behind NordVPN, is using feature flags. If you're in Toronto, headquarters is based there of RBC, Royal Bank of Canada. Royal Bank of Canada is using feature flags. And then probably one of the biggest feature flag providers well, not the biggest providers, features, but a company that uses a lot of feature flags is a company called Netlify. And if you've never used Netlify before or never heard of Netlify before, so they're a service for hosting sort of serverless websites and static websites. They have they're a huge company. Google them. They're awesome. If you've ever used Netlify, then by proxy, you've used DevCycle because DevCycle provides the feature flags that Netlify uses. Yeah, and so like to kind of back up some of the things that I was saying, this is actually a quote from Jason Berry, who's a senior staff engineer at Netlify, and ignore the DevCycle stuff, but like you can see here, so using feature flags allows us to merge parts of features into the main branch before the whole feature is complete, which helps avoid giant pull requests and merge conflicts. And so that's a really powerful part of using feature flags as part of that DevOps process. And there it is, straight from the source. And yeah, definitely go and check out Netlify. They are awesome. All right, so I said all of these wonderful words, but you're all developers. You want to see what's behind the curtain. You want to see how this actually works. And so while I'm not brave enough to do this live, I did record like a 4-minute demo, which I was going to pretend was live, but then I figured was probably not the right thing to do. You'd all be too impressed and I'd have to do more talks, which would obviously be terrible. But I recorded a little demo here that I want to kind of give you a run through of like what it looks like setting up feature flags in a modern stack using a feature flag management platform. I'm using DevCycle here. You can use whatever platform you want, and I'm going to provide some resources there. But I'm going to stop my share, and then I'm going to reshare, but focused on making sure my sound is there and optimizing for video clip. And Nonso, I won't be sure. Can you confirm that it's showing the right screen?
I'm still seeing the how do you implement feature flags.
Perfect.
Screen.
And now you should be seeing video screen.
Yes.
All right. And then just confirming that the audio is working. Here we are in the DevCycle document. Perfect. All right, I'm going to full screen this, and yeah, it's like 4 minutes. Check it out. And I think that we're in HD. Yeah, we're in full speed, and yeah, we'll get this, and this will give you an example of what kind of feature flagging, kind of in a modern way, really looks like with kind of a really powerful technology stack. Documentation. We're getting started exploring feature flags using. Here we are in the DevCycle documentation. We're getting started exploring feature flags using DevCycle is as simple as heading over to our examples page and choosing an example app built in a language and framework where you feel most comfortable. For today, we're going to be using a React Next.js app, which I've already set up over in Codespaces. Here we are in the source code for our sample Next.js app, which looks a little something like this. Now, because it's an example app, our SDK has already been installed that allows for the DevCycle platform to talk to your app. But there are a few things we need to do in order to show you how feature flagging would actually work. The first is to choose a feature that we're going to flag, and the second is to create that feature flag and related variables in the DevCycle platform. Since I already know that the feature I'm going to be flagging today is my Learn button, I'm ready to head over to the DevCycle platform and create this feature there. Here we are in the DevCycle dashboard, where creating a new feature is as easy as 1, 2, 3, as indicated in our Getting Started banner here. So we're going to go ahead and click on Create a Feature, and we're going to choose a release feature. Now, we're going to call this feature Enable Learn, which will automatically create a feature key and is going to set this to a Boolean true false initial variable type. Now that I've created my Enable Learn feature and variable in the DevCycle platform, I'm almost ready to head back over to my Next.js code to start adding my feature flag into the code base. But there's one important piece of information I'm going to need in order to do that. That will be my SDK key. To find that, head on over to the code sample section on your page, change to the environment, SDK language and variable, and click on the key icon to copy your SDK key to the clipboard. Back here in our Next.js codebase, we've navigated to the app.tsx file where we can define our client SDK key either in an N file or directly here within the code. And we're defining a user object, which for today is going to be my email, a basic user ID, and setting is anonymous to false to ensure that that information is communicated to the DevCycle platform. With that SDK key now added here in app.tsx, we can head back over to our index.tsx where that learn button is contained to wrap it in a feature flag. Here in my index.tsx file, you can see that I've already imported useVariable from the DevCycle React client SDK, but I haven't used it yet. That's because I haven't yet defined the variable that I'm going to use as my feature flag. To do that, I'm going to head and create a new constant called enableLearn, which is going to use variable enableLearn from the DevCycle platform, but by default, if it can't communicate with the DevCycle platform, it's going to set it to false. With enableLearn now defined in our codebase and pulling its value from the DevCycle platform, we can use the variable later on in our code to wrap that learn button in some conditional logic that will only show it if enableLearn is set to a truthy value. Back here on our Next.js UI, you'll notice that not much has changed, and that's because the default setting for targeting rules in a Boolean flag is always set to true for all users. Let's go and change that. Here I have the Next.js app and the DevCycle dashboard side by side so I can show you just how easy it is to decide who will and will not see a specific feature. I've already got the targeting rules pulled up from my development environment, which we're using right now, and you can see here that my main targeting rule that I'm using is saying to serve all users variation on, or to show them that learned feature that we've created. Now, changing this to not show it to people is as easy as changing this to variation off and clicking save, and in real time, that learn feature is going to disappear. Want to turn it back on? It's as easy as changing that variation from off to on, clicking save, and in real time, that feature is going to return for users in production. Back over, but without having the optimization. Did I just share anything? All right, here we go. So I think, oh, there we go. No, we're not going to run that again. All right, let's go to our full slideshow and all right, so I think audio, yeah, audio looks like it's going through. I think we're seeing the right screens. Can I confirm we're seeing the right screens?
Where can you learn more?
Perfect. So where can y'all learn more? Well, there's a couple places. And one of them, I got to say, I've heard about this guy. He's pretty great. I don't know. He's got fun glasses. His name's Andrew, and he actually maintains a repository called the Awesome Feature Flag Management Repository. So it is my desire, my hope. I want to get listed on the awesome list, and like I need to get there, and the community will help me do it. So I actually created this curated list of resources. Yeah, about a year ago now. And there's links to like articles, a ton of the providers, like opens. Basically, like if you want to learn anything about feature flags, check this out. I didn't put links in there just because honestly, just go to GitHub and type in awesome feature flag management and you will find it, or go and find my GitHub or my just like search Andrew D. McLean. That's where I am all over social and you'll find it. But yeah, that's awesome feature flag management. Great place to go to look to get some more resources. And if you've got some resources, if you have things that aren't listed in here, please make a contribution. Another place, I talked about this earlier, Open Feature. The Open Feature site is just openfeature.dev, but if you type in Open Feature, you'll find it. They've got a lot of awesome resources and tutorials on kind of getting started with basic feature flagging. Highly, highly encourage you to check them out too. Oh. So yeah, highly, highly encourage you to check out Open Feature as well. It's an awesome resource. Another great resource that I highly recommend is GitHub Education. So if there are students in the house or teachers in the house, actually, because I think teachers can take advantage of this too. And when I say students, I mean like university, undergrad students, graduate students, professors. Like if you have an education connection, take advantage of GitHub Education programs. They have this developer operations, this DevOps kind of, I don't know what they call them now, but it's like a learning pathway for you to learn about DevOps, which DevCycle is a part of, but also Jenkins and Sentry and New Relic and a lot of other amazing platforms that are there. So definitely worth checking out. Speaking of which, if you not the DevCycle is free already, like it's free to use, but if you had like some epic app that you're developing right now and you want to like get all the feature flags, there is like a free offer so students can go and access our GitHub Student Developer Pack offer. Basically, you sign up for the GitHub Student Developer Pack and you get access to like 100 million tools that are all amazing, and DevCycle is one of them. But also there's a ton of other tools. I did this when I was in school. Highly, highly recommend. Yeah, so also, if you want more information, you can always find more information about DevCycle on social. So that's where you can find us at DevCycle HQ. We're on Threads, we're on X, we're on LinkedIn, we're on GitHub, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitch, we're on, I don't know, is there a new social network that's out there? We're probably on that. Also, you can check out our docs, docs.devcycle.com. And if you want to find me, because I always love inviting more people into my personal community. I am also on all of these platforms. I am everywhere. I would love to say hello to you on any of these platforms to share some of the awesome stuff that y'all are doing as well. And also, I always like having more amazing people to go visit in Toronto when I'm there. So hit me up, find me on there. It's at Andrew D. McLean. And you can get all of my social deets there. Just Google Andrew McLean DevCycle and you'll also find me. I think I have all of those things listed. Yeah, so that's it. Thank y'all very, very much. I really appreciate the awesomeness that you have delivered by listening to the presentation. And yeah, I've seen a lot of questions coming in chat, so I'm super excited to answer some of them.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Andrew, for that presentation. It was very insightful. And it's like, even though like I've worked with feature flags in the past, I still learned a lot. And so really thank you so much. We do have a couple questions that did come into chat. One of them is by Vera. They were asking, how do we implement feature flags for a database change? For example, if there is an existing table with a few columns being added, how can we manage it through feature flags themselves?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I would say like there's some of these use cases that it's probably harder to explain depending on the use case. I personally, like as an example here, I use Laravel for a lot of my personal projects, which is a PHP framework. A lot of database changes happen in migrations. And so you could technically put using a PHP feature flag provider, you could actually put feature flags inside of your migration that you are running. And so say like, I only want this audience to have this migration happen for them. In terms of actually like within the database, I'm sure there are some systems that are out there that allow for you to do like database specific changes. I'm not specifically aware of a lot of them. But yeah, like I think that example that I gave would kind of be like a way that I might implement feature flags in a database migration or a shift or a change. Database migrations are like the scariest thing in the world. And so anything that I can do to add like an emergency off switch in that process is amazing. And so that's definitely somewhere where I would, yeah, potentially use that.
That's
Um,
awesome. Like it.
yeah, yeah. And then I saw the other question, how to implement feature flag for low-level classes, which is being used by many high-level classes. I'm not 100% sure what you mean there, Vera. I don't know if you want to either jump on audio or just type it in the chat again.
Uh,
Super happy.
yeah, what I mean by is that let's say we have an API entry point, right? From the entry point, we can at the very beginning top level, we can put a feature flag, right? If it's A, do this, or if it's B, do this. But the class A called class B called class D. The class D is used by multiple classes, right? So if I want to implement the feature flag of the class D, which is deep down, what's the best practice for that?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that I would say is powerful about like a feature flag management platform, and there's a lot of them that are there, is a lot of them have implemented this concept of feature grouping where you can have different targeting rules that you set based on whatever criteria that you want. But you could say, If you have multiple features that rely, or multiple classes that rely on one another, you could set feature flags in each of those that will only be impacted in specific situations, which is not a very clear way of me answering this, but I would say it's all about the way that you organize feature flags. I don't have a great answer for that, but I'm going to take this recording and I'm going to share it with my team afterwards. So any question that I can't answer, I'm going to throw it out to our team. And if you pop into the Dev Cycle Discord and just be like, hey, I was at the Tech Tank Toronto talk and I'd love an answer to this, I will get you that answer and I'll connect with our team to get that for you. So yeah, organization, but I don't have a specific, unfortunately, I don't have a specific good answer of how you could really implement that super well.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And then we had another question from Sammy, who was asking, with the rise of server rendering, would it be better practice to implement feature flags on the front end or the back end?
Both, everywhere, all of the places, server side, client side. We do a lot of stuff with Cloudflare workers. Like feature flags can literally go anywhere and everywhere. And the great thing is like there are feature flag implementations that are being created for all of these frameworks. So like I don't know if anybody here like uses Astro. It's a hot new framework. Well, it's less a framework and more like a macro framework. But like there is probably a feature flag that has been, or feature flag system that has been designed specifically for that will deal with any of its idiosyncrasies. We're actually just about to release, or maybe it's already released, a Next.js implementation of feature flags that like takes into account all of the things that are unique about Next.js as a React framework, and allows for feature flags to work seamlessly without you having to troubleshoot and debug a lot of things. But I would say use them on both and then decide where it's the most valuable. If you're doing it solo using like a config file, it gets real confusing. If you're using like a feature flag management platform or even something like FlagD, it becomes a lot easier to actually manage all of these different pieces. But yeah, both.
Awesome. We had a question from Jesus, who is asking what tools we would recommend to do feature flagging. But you talked about the different various feature flagging management platforms that we could use. Would there be any other tools out there, or?
Yeah, there's a lot. I saw somebody, yeah, like Jesus said, talked about like remote config from Firebase. It's awesome. Like it's really cool. I would say use any tool that is that makes it easy to go into your existing workflow. The worst thing you can do for starting to implement feature flags is like start using a big provider or a big feature flag management system, and then it's like too much. It's way more than you need, and then you can't maintain it because like you do end up actually having technical debt issues with feature flags because you've got all these old feature flags that exist in there. So honestly, if you're just getting started, doing something like putting them in your config file, I do that for my personal applications. So I like I said, I'm a Laravel developer, and so I have feature flags that exist in like a config file that I control using an M file, which allows for me to just like go into my host and just change that without having to deploy new code. And I probably am not ever going to get to the scale necessarily where a feature flag management system is going to be super valuable. But if I was ever looking to build for scale, that's where things are gonna go. So anything that makes your life easy is what I would recommend, and try a lot of the systems. Every one of us that are in this space are really trying to build out like really useful tools to help people onboard. We've got like a new crazy awesome onboarding that's coming out. Flagsmith has got a really cool onboarding. Launch Darkly has, I think there is called Launch Darkly Academy, and it's like a whole training scheme on using feature flags and using Launch Darkly. So yeah, super useful tools, but honestly, anything that makes your life as a developer is the right tool to use.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then we had a question from Eric. How can we ensure users are unable to access feature flags?
Yeah, so if you're talking about like an open source project, like so Eric, can you provide like a little bit more context on that? If you feel free to put it in chat if that's easier. If you're still here, if you're talking open source, I would say, uh, um, yeah. So open source projects, this is a unique one because often you'll have to you don't want to hard code your like your keys into your platform, so you have to have some sort of like shared key repository. But like in general, like a user, depending on where you're putting your, okay, I was thinking on the security side, once a production string user unable to change flags. Oh, that's a great question. I mean, implement them on the right side. Implement them in areas where a user would never be able to access. There's a lot of safeguards that are built in with SDKs that have been built out. If you're implementing it on your own, though, like don't have it something that a user is like can call that method. Like if a user can call the method, it shouldn't never have anything in a method that a user can call. But like have it at a level deep enough that like you would never be able to call it. It's very hard to actually change a feature flag state. So for example, with dev cycle and a lot of these platforms, what's actually happening is when your application is communicating with a feature flag management platform, it's basically based on a bunch of user information that's being fed in, which is translated into like a specific ID, which is then sent to the dev cycle platform and checked against a bunch of checks and balances. Like there's a lot of manipulation you would need to do between the like point of your application and whatever your feature flag provider is to actually change what they're seeing in there. And even then, you would also need to like refresh the page or like do a change to the page in such a way that it would load. It's very challenging because often what these feature flags will do, especially on the server side, is there's no way for you to ever interact with the code or the functionality that it had, let alone the actual feature flag management itself. Yeah, it's a great question though. The security question is huge. Definitely one that we're keenly aware of. But I think a lot of the work that you're going to do here, because of the nature of how you implement the flags versus the configs, it's going to be fairly easy to kind of keep safe. But yeah, I'm happy to check into that as well. I'm going to share all these questions with our team after the talk, and I'll be able to provide some more thoughts afterwards.
Awesome. Did anyone have any more questions for Andrew? Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Andrew, for the talk. Before we go, Sammy has kindly posted all our links for TechTank. If this is your first time joining us, then welcome. Here at TechTank, we really want to build an inclusive space for tech enthusiasts to collaborate and make meaningful connections. We host a lot of networking events, social events, virtual discussion panels like this, mentoring sessions, and we have more. So for more information, please head over to our website and feel free to join our awesome community. That's all for tonight. Thank you so much for coming out, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks,
Have a great night,
everybody.
everyone. Bye.